Welcome to Downshift. My name is Matt, and this is the 2024 Honda Civic. And thanks to our friends at Rust Arrow Honda, we're going to take one more look at this thing before next year when we get the hybrid variant. But what we're going to do today is take a look at this thing and how it stacks up to some of its main competition, covering the best and the rest. Let's get into it. But before we get into the pros and cons, what is new for 2024? Well, you get a $200 price hike pretty much across the board, and that's it. That's it, that's really it. So into the video, here we go. And unfortunately, it seems like this is the way that we always start our Honda videos, but I think it's a good catch-all to just cover at the front of the video. And it's just that there's a couple little things that are missing here. Just in other competitors, you get things like lumbar adjustments, memory seats, a heated steering wheel, some ambient lighting, a power passenger seat, or rear air vents. And I get some of these things are to push you up the brand food chain into something like an Accord, but even if you want something as simple as a panoramic roof, you're gonna have to jump all the way to an Acura to get that. And this point is actively being addressed next year, and we've mentioned it before, but still for 2024, we have to report on the car as it is, and as it stands right now, it doesn't have a hybrid. It's got two engine options, neither of which are hybrids. So we kind of ding it there, but that also being said, like we said, it's coming next year. And this thing is also good for like 28, 29 mpg in the city, and then also 37 mpg on the highway. So it is still very efficient. It's just to be competitive with something like an Elantra or a Corolla, I'd like to see the hybrid. But again, we'll get that next year. And it's just a little expensive, and these are specifically hatch prices, but the Civic then starts at about $25,000. What we have here is the Sport, but if you go all the way up to the Sport Touring, that starts at $32,545, which is a problem because a Corolla starts at thousands of dollars less, and the XLE Hybrid starts at also thousands of dollars less. And what that ultimately means is the most expensive Corolla that you can buy starts within $1,000 of the second cheapest Civic, and that Toyota is a hybrid. Again, the caveat being that the Corolla isn't a hatchback. The Civic hatch here is much more comparable to a Mazda 3 hatchback, which is pretty similar at starting MSRP, but you can also spend around $5,000 more if you spec out the Mazda. But there's a lot of great things about this Civic, so let's start to talk about some of those. The first thing that we'll talk about, and probably the best thing about this car, is the hatchback. Paulo and I actually jokingly compare pretty much every SUV that we test in terms of trunk capacity and cargo capacity to the Honda Civic hatchback, which is just an insane thing to think about on the face of it. But the space here is genuinely huge. With the rear seats up, you're looking at about 25 cubic feet of space, and with the rear seats down, they fold 60-40. You get 48 cubic feet of space. That is hugely practical, and you have the most brilliant privacy cover ever. 1,000,000%, if you're gonna get a Civic, the hatch is the way to go. You'll pay a little bit more for it, but it's so worth it. And I also love the fact that even in 2024, in the death of sedans and hatchbacks and everyone wants an automatic, you're getting a sedan, you're getting a hatchback here in the Civic, and you're also getting the option of a manual transmission. No one else is doing that. The CVT here, it's good, it's fine, but the 6-speed manual, it just adds a little bit of fun, doesn't it? And then there's the styling. Now the 11th gen that we have here is a lot more restrained, it's a lot more subtle in terms of its design philosophy than the 10th gen. And personally I have to say, especially in this spec with the Sport and the black wheels and the Sonic Gray, it looks spectacular. Up front, you've got that honeycomb grille, and you've got sharp LED running lights. You've got LED fog lights for your Sport Touring Halo trim, and the chassis for this generation is stronger. It's also about 1.5 inches longer in the wheelbase than last generation, and the 18-inch wheels that you get here are cool. They're very similar to the SI, but zooming out, you can see the profile. The hatch gives you kind of a Sportback roofline, almost like an Audi Sportback. And you've got the kind of crab grab taillights. They look like they would go all the way across, but it is kind of segmented, and the middle part is just for your brake light. And then of course you've got some badging, and you've got some faux dual exhaust out back. I'm just kind of staggered that they've made something that looks this good also be as practical as it is. And then there's the engine, or engines. Here we have the base engine. It's a 2-liter naturally aspirated 4-cylinder. It's what you're gonna get on the lower to mid trims. It's good for 158 horsepower. You can either get it, like I said, in the manual or the CVT. If you want more power and you don't have the money to go up to a Civic Si, you can still get the 1.5 turbocharged 4-cylinder, and that's good for 180 horsepower and 177 pound-feet of torque. So a little bit more power, and you get that little turbo theater and drama. Like, you can get that one in manual or CVT as well. But you just love to see the option here between engines and transmissions. And of course, the performance is good for 0 to 60 in like the mid 7-second range. It is front wheel drive. The base Civic is not gonna have the limited slip front differential that the zippier Civics are gonna have, but it's just a good engine. The powertrain fits the car well, and it feels natural and organic. But then jumping into the interior, I know earlier we covered a couple of the small things that the Civic might be missing compared to rivals, but overall, when you talk about the interior design and build and some of the materials that you're going to get here versus the competition, this is punching at the top of the segment next to things like Mazda. Maybe not quite there, but you are going to pay a lot more for that Mazda experience. So this is a great combination of value and build and quality. Of course, you can get interior options between cloth and leather. If you go up to the Sport Touring, you will get really nice leathers with some contrasted stitching and piping. And you can also get any color interior that you want as long as it's black. You can also get a sunroof in your Sport Touring trim, but every trim of Civic is going to get these really satisfying, clicky, physical climate controls. I love the full dash honeycomb vent detailing with the toggle knobs, weirdly satisfying. And you get nice tech features too, like a totally digital 10-inch instrument cluster on your top Sport Touring trim, and you get a split one here, but it's the same size that you would get regardless of how much money you spend on a CR-V. And then your center infotainment system, you can upgrade to a 9-inch touchscreen, which will give you wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but you can get a wireless charger on your Sport Touring as well. You get a reverse camera with cross-traffic alert and emergency braking, and you get a pretty nice Bose audio system depending on what spec you get. And I know a lot of that stuff that we just talked about is for the Halo Sport Touring trim, but even in this Sport trim, which is kind of more of the volume seller, the mid-market trim, it's still wildly comfortable. The cloth seats have some nice detailing and accenting. They even have some faux leather detailing on the side, and it's just really comfortable, and it's just a nice place to spend time if you just want to get from A to B. And then we start to talk about the all-important driving experience as a whole. Now, long story short, this and the Mazda 3 are the best driving cars in this segment. Noticeably better than an Elantra, noticeably better than a Corolla. Your LX and Sport trims, like we're in here, are going to get the base 2-liter engine like we've talked about, but if you go up to the EX and the Sport Touring, you'll get that 1.5 turbo from the SI. Does it feel like a sports car or a hot hatch? No, but it shouldn't. That's what the SI and the Type R are for. But here you still get a multi-link rear suspension, which you don't get in some of the other competitors, and that helps the car feel a little bit more athletic, a little bit more nimble and zippy around corners. The steering here is good. It's got some good and natural weight to it, but it just feels kind of spunky with also the dual personality of being comfortable. It's just easy to drive while still being a little bit fun. Overall, it's a great little car to drive, and that's really all I have to say about it. And then in the rear seats, this may be a compact car, but it does not feel that way from the back seat. I haven't even messed with this seat. This is kind of where I would sit at 6'1", and I have inches, a surprising amount of inches of knee room in front of me, and I even have headroom with the sloping roofline that you get with the hatch here. This is pretty amazing. But yes, the rear seats are bigger than they were previous generation. The materials in back aren't quite as nice as the front, and you have to go up in trim to get something like a map pocket. You also don't have air vents, but you do get dual USB-Cs, cup holders, and a comfy enough space. Of course, that's again, if you go up to the Sport Touring trim on the Sport here, no air vents, no chargers, no map pockets, and weirdly, no cup holders back here. A little strange, but ultimately, if you're just looking for size and comfort, it's perfectly good, even for 6-footers. But there's also a couple little things that don't fall into a major category, but are definitely worth talking about. Now, you don't have a lot of ambient light options, but depending on what trim you get, you can get this little insert here as an ambient light. And in terms of materials, you do have some gloss black near your vents. Maybe it'll get a little dusty, but here, where you're gonna be interacting with, putting your cups and mugs and things down here, it is a nice textured pattern, and it's not gloss black, so it's gonna stay looking a little bit cleaner and better for longer. And you can see your engine start stop button pulses white. It's gonna pulse red in the Type R, but you put your foot on the brake, and then it stays solid white. Kinda cool. And listen to the seatbelt chimes as I start the car up. So it's not as bad as Mazda, but still not great. And most cars come with a host of chargers. Here, you just get this USB-A. You have to go up in trim to get a wireless charger. And then you also don't get any chargers here in your center bin. You also don't get any chargers in your rear seat. So it's a little interesting that you only get one charger for the whole car. Plus, of course, the 12-volt. Okay. In the Sport mode, in the Civic hatch, Sport. Sport mode for the Sport. Yes, no LSD. Foot hard down now. Oh yes. Ooh, okay. It's not fast. It sounds okay though. Not great, but you know, pretty decent. I think if I'm honest, this looks more sporty than it feels, but the other side of that coin is the fact that it's really comfortable. And obviously straight line speed is not this thing's friend, but you've got the multi-link suspension. This thing's only about 3,000 pounds-ish, so once you get it in a corner, once you start like actually playing with it, it's fun to hustle it around. I'm not saying it's gonna be a Type R or a GTI or anything like that, but it's just a fun car. And I think that's what Honda does really, really well. Even in their big 3-row Pilot that we were in earlier this week, it's like they have the dynamics and the mechanicals down really well, like almost to a Mazda degree. It's just the engines fit the cars, the dynamics fit the personality of the car without having to spend insane amounts of money. Everything is a whole bunch of money now, except for, you know, some of these Hondas. So to have some of this driving personality and character without having to spend so much money is really welcome. It's really cool. I like that. We'll dive into this corner here. Left-hander on the brakes. Turn in, excellent response. You can power into it. I mean, great, great. I don't know, I just like it. So that is the best and the rest of the Honda Civic, at least in hatch form. And I have to say, while it may not be perfect in every little category, it is still probably the best compact sedan slash hatchback thing. Even with the tapered roof, the hatch size is untouchable. The practicality is unbelievable, and for that, it makes it a great little car. So thanks again to our friends at Rust Era Honda for letting us have a go, and we'll see you in the next one.